It is the summer of 1989, and something is happening on a British racetrack that almost nobody saw coming. A Norton, an actual Norton, a brand the world had quietly filed away under Britain's past, is howling down the Snetterton Straight and picking off Japanese superbikes like they have the handbrake on. And every so often it spits a lick of flame out of the exhaust while it does it. Terry Reimer sat on a Yamaha, moaned to the press that he was getting fed up with these Nortons coming past, throwing flames at him. Now, the engine making that noise started life in a police bike. And the man who looked at that police bike and saw a race winner hiding inside it would be pushed out of the project just over a year later. This is the story of Brian Crighton. So let's rewind, because to understand how mad this is, you need to understand the man first. Brian Crighton was not a factory golden boy. He was not a conventionally trained engineer, no degree, no fancy apprenticeship. He was self-taught, and his racing career started from a place a lot of us know painfully well. He simply couldn't afford the good stuff. He couldn't buy a proper purpose-built racing bike, so he bought ordinary Hondas instead and modified them himself, developing them until they could embarrass machinery that cost a fortune. And it worked. He became British 50cc champion 3 separate times, in 1973, 1974, and 1976. Riding a tuned-up Honda, he'd fettled himself. That is the entire personality of this man in one sentence, and you're going to want to hold on to it because it explains everything that comes next. By the early 1980s, Crighton had gone into business for himself, running his own Honda motorcycle dealership in Brown Hills in the Midlands. Nice, stable, respectable little life. And then a friend of his who had gone off to work at Norton offered him a go on one of the company's strange rotary-engined prototypes. Now, Norton at this point was a ghost of the great British marque it had once been, hanging on, mostly building bikes for police forces. But that rotary engine was something else entirely. Crighton wound it open and the thing floored him. He had never felt anything so smooth, so eerily fast, so completely unlike a normal motorbike engine. He got off it thinking one thought very clearly: he had to get a job at this place. So he did the thing any sensible adult would tell you never to do. He sold the dealership. He walked away from his own business. And in 1984, he took a job at Norton, right down at the bottom, in the service department, looking after the rotary-powered police and service machines. From running his own company to servicing police bikes on the factory floor, all because one test ride had lit a fire in him. Within about a year, they moved him into research and development, and that is where this whole story catches fire, sometimes literally. Right, quick pit stop, because you need to understand this engine, and it's honestly one of the strangest, coolest things in motorcycling. A normal engine has pistons, little metal slugs that get violently slammed up and down thousands of times a minute. It works, but it's basically a very organized explosion permanently trying to shake itself apart. A Wankel rotary engine throws all of that out. Instead of pistons pumping up and down, it has a rounded triangular rotor that orbits and spins inside a specially shaped chamber. Far fewer moving parts, very little vibration compared to a piston engine. Compact, light, and it revs like it's personally offended by gravity. On paper, it looks like a miracle. In practice, it is a beautiful nightmare. Rotaries are brutally hard to keep cool, especially in a motorbike where there's nowhere to hide a big radiator. They're thirsty, they're filthy by modern emission standards, and the seals inside them have historically worn out with depressing enthusiasm. So let's be honest right from the start, because this matters. This engine was never perfect. It was brilliant and badly flawed at exactly the same time, and that tension is the whole story. And there's another thing we need to be straight about, because credit matters. Brian Crighton did not invent this engine. The Norton Rotary traces back to an engineer named David Garside, who developed it years earlier during the old BSA era, starting from a bought-in German Fichtel and Sachs-Wankel unit and building it up into a twin-rotor motor of his own. Garside is genuinely the father of the Norton Rotary, and he deserves that title. But here's what almost everyone had missed. That engine was only ever seen as a road engine. A smooth, torquey motor for police patrol bikes and comfy tourers, making somewhere around 80 horsepower. Almost nobody looked at that heavy, thirsty police motor and saw a race winner hiding inside it. Almost nobody, that is, except the self-taught bloke down in the service department. So Crighton went to management and told them this engine could be a monster on a racetrack. And they, more or less, told him he was out of his mind. And honestly, you can sort of see their point. Norton was skint. The Rotary was a weird, thirsty oddity that half the industry considered a dead end. And here's a bloke from the service department, no engineering degree, saying he can turn the police bike motor into something that beats Honda. Of course they said no. He couldn't drum up interest, he couldn't get a budget, he couldn't get any real backing at all. So he got the classic brush off that ambitious people get handed everywhere in the world. Fine, if you're so sure, do it in your own time. And that is exactly what he did. He took an engine out of a written-off police bike and started working evenings and weekends in the factory caretaker's shed. Picture that for a second. One of the sharpest racing minds in the building, tinkering away in a shed like a man building a go-kart, because the suits upstairs wouldn't give him a proper room and a few quid. Told he was mad by his own employer, plenty of people would have quietly let it drop. He just kept turning up at night. And in that shed, he cracked it. He came up with an idea he called the exhaust ejector, and it is beautiful in how simple it is. The Rotary's twin curses were heat and breathing. Norton's road setup cooled the engine by dragging the intake air through the scorching hot internals first, which kept the metal alive but heated up the incoming air and strangled the power. So Crighton started thinking less like a four-stroke engineer and more like a two-stroke tuner. He redesigned the exhaust so the gases came screaming out at enormous speed through a venturi, and that fast-moving gas created a strong, low-pressure area behind it, a vacuum, and that vacuum did two jobs at once. It pulled cooling air straight through the core of the engine, and it let the carburetors breathe freely instead of being choked. Cooler engine, far more power from one clever bit of plumbing. The numbers tell you everything. The road engine made somewhere around 80 to 85 horsepower. Crichton's version was soon making 120. In full race trim, it climbed to roughly 130, and depending on the tune and the ram air effect at high speed, some sources put it as high as 148. He had, near enough, doubled it. Oh, and it was now deafening, and it shot flames out of the exhaust, which, let's be honest, is a fairly spectacular bonus feature. But the bosses still weren't having it. A shed project cooked up by a bloke from the service department, do me a favor. So in 1987, basically to shut everyone up, Crighton took his prototype to the Myrie Proving Ground, a proper high-speed test track, and clocked it at 170 miles per hour. In his own words, he couldn't get anyone interested until it did 170 miles per hour at Mira, and it all went from there. Suddenly, the shed project was the company's future. He got a proper race shop. A real racing machine was built around a lightweight Spondon frame within a few weeks. And on its debut at a club meeting at Darley Moor in 1987, it finished third. Not bad. Then it went out the very next time and won. The bloke they were convinced was mad had just built a race winner out of a dead police engine. At the end of 1988, Crighton wanted to see what his creation could do in front of a proper crowd, so he invited a racer named Steve Spray to try the spare bike at the Power Bike International at Brands Hatch in October. Spray was a capable short-circuit racer, campaigning a Suzuki, but he had never ridden a Rotary in his life. He went out, did his practice laps, came back in, and Crighton asked what he wanted changing. Spray basically shrugged and told him to just put petrol in it. Then he went out and won. Both races he entered, in fact. And that performance was enough to land John Player Special, the cigarette brand behind that absolutely gorgeous black and gold livery. Within weeks, the legendary JPS Norton race team was born for 1989. From a scrapped police motor in a caretaker's shed to a factory-liveried race team, you could not write it. And 1989 was the year the whole thing went supernova. The water-cooled version of Crichton's engine was now making somewhere north of 130 horsepower, wrapped in a light Spondon-frame chassis, and the black and gold Nortons became the story of the British racing season. Steve Spray won the 750 Super Cup Championship. He won the British TT Formula One title on top of it. The team set lap records at Donington, at Thruxton, at Snetterton, at Brands Hatch, at Cadwell Park. A British motorcycle built around an engine everyone had written off was going toe-to-toe with well-funded, factory-backed Japanese machinery and beating it, sometimes while roasting it with actual flames. British racing had not been this loud, this packed, this genuinely happy in years. Spray was named Motorcycle News Man of the Year, and it all traced back to Crichton seeing racing potential where almost nobody else had. If you are enjoying this one, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button, because this channel is basically a home for exactly these stories, the underdogs, and the overlooked geniuses that history nearly forgot. Right, back to it, because this is where our fairy tale takes a very ugly turn. At the exact moment Crichton reached the summit of British short-circuit racing, the ground opened up underneath him. In 1989, he had been promoted to Senior Development Engineer, which sounds great on a business card, but in practice, buried him. He was deep in engine development, race bike development, and the running of the racing effort, all at once, and it was becoming an impossible load for one man. So Norton's management brought in a new man to run the works race team, placed over the top of him. That man was Barry Simmons, who had previously run the Honda Britain racing squad. Read that again. To manage the team built around the engine that was humbling Honda, Norton hired the man who used to run Honda's British racing effort. Now, to be fair to Simmons, he was an experienced, capable racing manager, and he had been handed a team that was growing faster than it could cope with. But he started changing the operation. New people, a new direction, and most damaging of all, a switch of tire supplier. And this is the bit that really stings. The team had spent an enormous amount of painstaking effort setting those bikes up around Dunlop tires. Every spring rate, every damping setting, every chassis tweak, tested and retested and dialed in over a full season. That is what race development actually is. It's 1,000 tiny decisions that only make sense together. Simmons moved them to Michelin, and just like that, in the team's own words, a full year of setup work went straight out of the window. Think about what that does to a man like Crichton. He had bled for every single horsepower, in a shed, in his own time, for no money, while being told he was mad, and now someone who had walked in the door 12 months earlier was casually unpicking it. The rows started, and they didn't stop. In September 1990, Brian Crighton left Norton. In his own words, everything he wanted, the new man did the opposite, and it came down to a simple ultimatum. It was either him or Simmons, and Norton were never getting rid of Simmons. On paper, the company kept him on for a bit of consultancy work, a tidy little fig leaf over what had actually happened. And look, you can call it a resignation, you can call it a split, you can call it being pushed out. The result was exactly the same. The man who created the Rotary racer was no longer at the center of his own project. And his wife later put it perfectly, describing the winning machines as very much Brian's babies, as opposed to the bikes that came afterwards. So what happened once he had gone? The works team began to fade. The results dried up, the Japanese factories started winning again, and at the end of 1992, John Player pulled its sponsorship and the team folded. But here comes the gut punch. The single greatest moment in the Rotary Norton's entire life happened right there in the twilight, without him. The 1992 Isle of Man Senior TT. Steve Hislop, riding a privately run white Norton Rotary, went head-to-head around the terrifying mountain course against Carl Fogarty on a Yamaha. And if you have never watched the Isle of Man TT, understand what that actually means. This is not a racetrack. This is 37 3/4 miles of public road, lined with stone walls, curbs, telegraph poles, and houses, and they ride it at an average of over 120 miles per hour, 6 laps of it, 228 miles, nearly 2 hours of flat-out riding with nothing to hit but the island itself. And because riders set off at intervals rather than side by side, neither man could actually see the other. They were racing ghosts, chasing a number on a pit board, riding right on the edge of their lives with no idea whether it was enough. Fogarty rode so hard that day that he set a new outright lap record of 123.61 miles per hour on the final lap, a mark that would stand for 7 years. He genuinely could not have gone faster. And it still was not enough. Hislop beat him by 4.4 seconds after nearly 2 hours of racing. 4 seconds from 120-odd miles of road. In 2011, fans voted it the greatest TT race of all time. And it was the first time a British bike had won the Blue Ribbon Senior TT since Mike Halewood, all the way back in 1961. And here is how broke that team was while it was making history. Barry Simmons, the very man Crighton had clashed with, later described arriving at the race shop to find bailiffs loading up the mechanics' toolboxes, and another time wandering off with the CNC machine. Engineer Chris Mayhew described flying crankshafts back to Birmingham to Sparka Road extra oil holes into them, just to stop the engines seizing solid. Simmons and Mayhew even gave up their own salaries so the mechanics could still get paid, which, credit where it is due, is a hell of a thing to do. Crichton's engine was winning the greatest race in the sport, while the operation around it was quite literally being carted away by debt collectors. Because the company was rotten from the top down. Norton's owner, a financier named Philippe Leroux, had grandly rebranded the marque as the Porsche of the motorcycling world. Less grand was what came next. He resigned in 1991 while the company was under a Department of Trade and Industry investigation, and Norton slid into liquidation. Years later, in 1998, Leroux was fined £15,000 at Southwark Crown Court for making a misleading statement under the Financial Services Act over a letter that helped entice underwriters into a failed £7.5 million rights issue. He was also banned from acting as a company director for 5 years. Norton's remains were later picked up by a Canadian property dealer named Nelson Scalbania, who, in a completely separate matter years afterwards, was convicted over the theft of $100,000 from a business associate. The company was broken up and sold on. The gorgeous road-going F1, styled by Seymour Powell and derived directly from Crichton's racer, was built in tiny numbers, just 140 of them, plus around 70 of the later F1 Sport, before it all stopped in 1994. And then comes the final twist. Because even without him, Crichton's engine refused to die. He teamed up with the racing legend Colin Seeley, and in 1994, Ian Simpson took their Rotary to the British Superbike title, with Simpson and teammate Phil Borley racking up 14 wins between them, a dominant season. So how did the sport respond to this stubborn British engine beating everyone again? For 1995, the rules changed. Complaints had been building for years that the Rotary held an unfair advantage over the 4-cylinder bikes, and on top of that came homologation requirements demanding more road bikes than a broke Norton could possibly build. Between the two, the Rotary was simply left with nowhere to race. Crichton himself doesn't dress it up. He says they were banned after winning the championship and reckons Honda were a bit fed up with a Rotary beating their RC45. Call it a ban, call it a rule change, call it the closing of a loophole. The effect was identical. His engine no longer had a home. But this is not a sad story, because Brian Crighton turns out to be one of those rare people who simply does not know how to quit. After it all fell apart, he took a job at the National Motorcycle Museum in Birmingham, where he ended up caring for and restoring the very Rotary Nortons he had helped create. The man became the custodian of his own legend. And then the museum's founder, Roy Richards, a proper Norton fanatic, learned about a computer-controlled rotary racer that Crighton had designed for 1995 but had never been allowed to build. So Richards funded it. Finally, somebody handed Crighton the keys instead of showing him the door, and the NRV 588 was born, complete with traction control and a variable geometry intake. And he kept going. From around 2009, he partnered with Rotron Power and Aerospace Rotary Specialist, and over roughly 12 years, the two of them chased down the machine he'd been carrying around in his head his entire life. The result is called the Crighton CR700W, 220 horsepower from a 690 cubic centimeter twin rotor engine in a motorcycle weighing 129.5 kilograms dry. That is prototype racer territory, dreamed up by the bloke who started out fixing police bikes. Modern silicon nitride ceramic apex seals are claimed to have finally tamed the wear problems that haunted rotaries for decades. 25 of them are being built, launched at 85,000 pounds each, and hand-assembled by Crighton himself, who was 73 when it was unveiled. In his own words, it's the culmination of his career's achievements, the very best of his engineering wisdom. And this time, the name on the tank is his, not Norton's, not John Player's, his. So think back to where we started. A flame-spitting Norton, screaming past the Japanese giants in the summer of 1989, built around an engine everyone else had dismissed as a curiosity for police bikes. He lost control of those bikes. He lost the team he'd made possible. The rules moved on and left his engine with nowhere to race, which to him and to everyone who loved those things felt an awful lot like being punished for being too good. And more than 30 years later, that same self-taught racer engineer is still standing, still building, still chasing the flawed and glorious machine nobody else believed in. They pushed the genius out. But it turns out you can't really get rid of genius. It just goes off and builds a better engine somewhere else. So tell me down in the comments, who is the most underrated engineer in motorsport history? Because I reckon Brian Crighton is right up there. If this one hit you the way it hit me, drop a like, subscribe for more forgotten legends, and I'll see you in the next one.